With the CFL Combine now behind us, we can now start to look forward to the CFL Draft, which is just a little more than a month away. And with that in mind, I just wanted to present 7 players that I think really made a big impression on me during the CFL's Combine this past weekend. If you guys enjoy the video, as always, be sure to hit like and subscribe. And with that said, let's get on with the list. First guy I just want to talk about is Keaton Bruggeling, wide receiver out of Carleton. A guy that really flashed as a bigger receiver, 6'3", 212 pounds, but showed a lot better movement skills than was expected. Ran a 4.55 40-yard dash. That's really good speed for a CFL receiver. At the 2021 season, he had 6 games played, 17 receptions, 225 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Looked really strong in terms of the one-on-ones this weekend, just using that big frame to his advantage, especially on those inside routes. Now, obviously, the wide receiver versus DB one-on-ones at the Combine are weighted towards the offense, but I thought Bruggeling looked really good in those drills. And if you want a comparable guy, look at the 2020 draft when Keon Schaefer-Baker, who's now a Saskatchewan Rough Rider, went in the 4th round. If you want a guy that's a big sleeper in this year's class, Bruggeling might be your guy. The next guy I want to talk about is wide receiver Gavin Cobb from Manitoba, who had a really good performance at the Combine. He's a fast riser who really repeated his regional Combine performance, had the 3rd fastest 40 time at the National Combine with a 4.53, really fast, and then had a 3rd best 3-cone drill, really showing that change of direction, quickness. And, in the one-on-ones, he had really smooth route running in and out of his breaks. He's a little bit of an undersized guy, but a lot of other receivers in this draft class are undersized. So I don't think that's really going to hurt him too much on draft day. And with these repeated great performances, showcasing that athleticism as one of the best athletes in this class, I think his stock is on the rise. Next, I want to talk about defensive back Tyrell Ford from Waterloo, who did have the fastest 40 time at this year's event with a 4.42, extremely impressive. He really showcased his prowess in the one-on-one segment, a drill that, again, it favors the receivers in this Combine setting. I precisely remember him locking up the Philpott brothers, who are thought to be the best receivers in this year's class, for a couple of reps, and looked incredibly impressive. Obviously, he was going against his brother Trey, who was throwing the ball to these receivers. Kind of knew where Trey was going to place the ball. So Ford was incredibly impressive in this segment, in the one-on-one segment, and throughout the entire Combine. And I would suspect these testing numbers might increase the attention for him south of the border as well with the NFL teams. But if teams feel like he will be in a CFL training camp this year, he may have vaulted himself towards the top few picks in this year's CFL draft, even though I think he might garner an undrafted free agent contract down south. Next, I want to talk about a guy that I talked about in a recent video, and that is defensive lineman slash linebacker Enoch Penny-Laryea out of McMaster. He followed up an impressive regional Combine performance with perhaps an even better one at the National Combine. He finished at or near the top in the bench press, the 40-yard dash, vertical jump, and the broad jump. So we're talking about quite an athlete here. Though he was listed as a defensive end, evaluators at the CFL Combine asked him to work out as a linebacker in the one-on-one segment. And for a guy that hasn't played a ton of coverage, he held his own against the best running backs in this year's class. That closing speed was really on display throughout that time. Even though he's not the fastest guy in and out of his breaks, you can tell it's not a natural motion for him. His ability with that athleticism to close while the ball is in the air really stood out to me. And while certainly not the most refined player in this year's class, his incredible testing performances have all but certainly shot his name up draft boards around the CFL. Speaking of which, this next guy, offensive lineman Rodin Brown out of Alberta, is a very fast riser. Brown is undersized at 285 pounds, but showcased incredible base strength and blocking mechanics across multiple positions in the one-on-ones. The Halifax native might have to put on a little bit more bulk to play at the CFL level, but I was incredibly impressed with what I saw from him this past weekend, and is easily the biggest winner out of the offensive linemen, in my opinion, at this year's Combine. Now on the other side of the ball, a guy that really stood out to me was defensive lineman Joshua Archibald out of McGill. A 6'3", 246-pound defensive lineman, Archibald displayed great mobility at the Combine. His lateral quickness was on display with the fastest shuttle time among all defensive linemen, while he passed the eye test in the one-on-ones against some of the top-rated linemen in this year's class. Playing for a less than prominent McGill program has allowed Archibald to slip below the radar, but don't be surprised if he hears his name called early on draft day. Next, I want to go to the secondary and talk about defensive back Adrian Greene out of St. Mary's. Another player that I thought just had a really solid all-around day. Greene had very solid testing numbers all around when compared to other defensive backs. But what really impressed me was his performance in the one-on-ones, where I thought he was easily the best defensive back there, not named Tyrell Ford. It is pretty common for Atlantic University prospects to be overlooked, so Greene may be one of the biggest sleepers in this year's draft. And now finally, I just want to talk about a guy that I think is the big winner out of this year's Combine, and that is easily linebacker Tyrell Richards out of Syracuse. This guy made Combine history by working out as defensive lineman, linebacker, and DB, just showcasing great versatility all day long. He had strong overall testing numbers, including good long speed and lateral agility, as evidenced by his 40-yard dash and 3-cone times. And it was hilarious to see the look on Elks head coach Chris Jones' face when he was watching Richards. Sometimes the camera would just pan over to him. And with Jones, he's been known to love these versatile athletes on the defensive side, these kind of positionless players. And Richards is a great, fit for that, what Jones may be looking for to use in Edmonton. And I think this is the type of performance that makes me confidently think that Richards will absolutely be going with the first overall pick come May, because it was just that impressive performance from him. So those are just 8 players that I think really improved the draft stock this weekend. Be sure to let me know if you guys think any other players improved the draft stock this weekend. Anybody really impress you? Be sure to let me know in the comments section. Be sure to hit the like button if you enjoyed the video, everybody. Really appreciate it. And with that said, hope you guys have a great day. Peace.